Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
Guys, today's episode is amazing for a million reasons. Stella is one of those people that I want to be when I grow up, and she's like probably 10 years younger than me. I don't know. She's just getting started in her career, but she's already so established. She started this podcast and this movement called Everyday Endorphins, which is about movement and mental health and getting offline and creating real time, experience with others. And she's so scrappy. She's one of those people that is shooting her shot. She's going out there. She's partnering with major brands. She's landing incredible podcast hosts. And I'm just overjoyed to have her on the podcast because she empowers me. She inspires me. And I know that you're going to feel empowered and inspired by her. Please also listen to her podcast. Please support her. Just because you listen to mine doesn't mean you can't listen to someone else's. I know that I'm a listener. I'm a fan. I have much respect for her. Outside of the fact that she did hire Dial Zero to do her branding, and we love it. Obviously, I have a bit of an affinity for that reason. But outside of that, she's just an incredible woman. She's a force. And I can't wait for you to hear more from Stella. Let's dive into the episode. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Unfiltered Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Ashley Pollard, and today we have the lovely Stella Stephanopoulos with us. Hello, Stella. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley. I am so excited to be here today.
I'm so excited because, life is very funny, where we were connected through Kelly, who is a full-time member of the Dial Zero marketing team. And you, if I remember correctly, know her from college, right?
Yes. And Kelly was a guest on my podcast. And it's just very full circle because she and your team helped to develop the beautiful rebrand of my show. So yeah, life is funny.
I wasn't even going to bring up the rebrand because I didn't want to be like pimping ourselves out or anything. But like, I will say you were one of our best clients of 2023. I mean, not only are you like the most kind person ever, but also it was really refreshing for you to come in and say, I know what I want. I know what I like. I have a vision. I know where I'm heading. It's really validating to see women doing things with the utmost clarity of the end goal and being really clear about the steps to get there. So it was such a fun project. We really loved it.
Thank you. Well, maybe it's because I work in client services in my day job that I know what it's like to work with difficult clients, but I had some sort of broad vision, but I really didn't exactly know what I wanted. And I think this is typical of client services work, but also just life. Like people actually don't really know what they want. Like we're constantly figuring out what we want. So it was really such an impactful experience for me to have support and a team helping me champion this vision and also helping me clarify what I wanted and then being able to depict what I was saying into like a beautiful design and visual element. Like now I have such a great appreciation for design and art in a different way because I see the work that goes into turning a concept into something that you can see and like hopefully something that evokes a feeling out of you. So I only have positive things to say. And so does my community. Thank you again. It was fantastic.
We loved it. And what you said there was like evoking a feeling. And I want to talk a little bit about Everyday Endorphins. I also want to talk about you running Everyday Endorphins while you have a full-time job because it's giving hustler energy and I'm here for it. But tell me a little bit about like Everyday Endorphins. The podcast itself feels like something that has to have an origin story. It doesn't feel like something random. It doesn't feel like I have a fun idea. We should try this. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like there has to be something there that you were like, I feel like I'm on a mission because of this thing that I saw or experienced or had in my life.
Everyday Endorphins is deeply personal to me because I see it as more than just a podcast. Honestly, it feels like a wellness concept, a life concept. And although it right now manifests in the form of a podcast that I started 3 years ago, really the origin story for the name dates back to 2013, which was about a decade ago. And that's when I started an Instagram account, and it was a fitness blog. At the time, I was on a rowing team in high school, first time being a student athlete. If you knew me from 13 years old and prior to that, I was very much like a girly girl, didn't like sports, didn't want to do anything that was athletic. deciding to be on a crew team was this like 180 experience because now all of a sudden I was doing something very physically active. So I wanted to document it. And I made this Instagram, and it was just a very lighthearted account where I would post about the workouts I was doing, the food I was eating. And then it kind of trickled away in college because when I went to school in St. Louis, I decided I didn't want to row anymore. Felt like the messaging I was promoting was no longer congruent with my own understanding of health and wellness. Also, when I got to college, I realized that our health is so driven by our mental well-being. Like our physical health is so influenced by the thoughts going on in our head. So I decided to scale back on the Instagram. 2020 hit, COVID, lots of time on my hands, lots of little epiphanies, revelations about myself, my interests, my passions. And I felt like I wanted to share this message around health and wellness, specifically happiness. And I felt like the best way to do that would be a podcast. But luckily, I already have this Instagram. So I decided to repurpose the account I had previously started and use it as a way to promote this now podcast that I was going to name Everyday Endorphins. And that's really how the two like social platforms merged. And now it's expanded through not only audio episodes, but doing wellness events in New York, really trying to build a community that gets excited to feel in control of their own well-being and recognize that health and wellness is not just like one little part of our lives. It's not just one little activity of doing a cold plunge or going to a yoga class. It really just permeates into every single part of your life. And that's really the mission behind it, is to share that messaging.
Yeah, I think the inspiring part of it is that it's not like wake up at 6 a.m. and then journal for an hour and a half and go running for 40 minutes and then meditate for 2 hours and then do a cold plunge for 20. It's none of this feels really unrealistic when you are talking about it. It's not this like guidebook of how to live in a wellness state. It's really, to your point, a pursuit of happiness, which I think is like kind of the point of all of this anyway. You know what I mean? Like, isn't that the goal?
Yeah, exactly. And it really does not only feel like an extension of myself, but also like a mirror, a reflection onto my current state. And so I've noticed how the conversations have shifted over the past 3 years. And that's been largely because of maybe things that have been going on in my personal life. And then the lessons that I learn through my podcast enable me to hopefully be a stronger advocate for the things that I speak about. So I feel like I have to hold myself accountable to leading the life that I want Everyday Endorphins to embody. So it really is this back and forth, and it fluctuates. And, you know, for example, this morning, we're doing this podcast recording at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. Normally, I would have wanted to wake up at 7, go to the gym, shower, have my nice little morning routine, check some emails, and then sit down to record this. I woke up at 8:30, which was late for me. I was exhausted. I laid in bed. I watched TikTok. Then I did my laundry and I went to get a coffee and I sat down. So I share this because not every morning, not every day is going to look the same. And learning to give yourself grace is so important. And so much of my life, I really felt like I needed to follow the rules that I created in my head, but you don't have to. It's actually really empowering to feel like a sense of confidence in your decisions and not feel like you are acting out of some behaviors because you feel like you should be doing something versus another.
Yeah. You know, you have a good point there where, you know, you say like, we don't have these rules. One thing that I've kind of done for myself is create a set of rules, but to create multiple sets of those rules. So when I wake up, if I'm like not feeling it, for instance, today, I also slept in. Something is lunar, something's going on because I was like, I'm not getting up. Nope. I'm not doing my 6 a.m. work, like wake up. I'm not doing my this. I was like, I am slicking back my hair and recording this podcast and then taking a very long walk. And that's okay. That's part of one of my many rules. If I'm like feeling chill, then I'm writing it out, you know? And I love that you say the piece about giving yourself grace. It's so valid. It's so important because not every day we can be this like perfect version of ourselves. And with push, there is a need for recovery. If you look at like some of the best athletes in the world, like they recover as hard as they push. And that's how I want to kind of like live my life. You know, if I want to be pushing for really big things, I need to recover just as hard. But I kind of want to come back to something that you alluded to where you were saying that the podcast is kind of growing in tandem with the way that you're growing, with the way that you're learning about yourself. And I think that happens with a lot of businesses. I think that happens with a lot of brands. And when I notice people are having a hard time getting into their brand, getting into their business, getting into what they're building, it's because they're really holding themselves back from it. It's a very vulnerable move to share, to put yourself into it. And so I'm wondering, like, how has that experience been for you to kind of, I don't want to say merge the two, but to really bring a lot of you into it? Has that felt vulnerable? Has it felt natural? Have you, had to challenge yourself along the way? Like, tell me a little bit about that experience.
Doing this rebrand honestly was like the catalyst for shifting into this new era of the show, because up until, or I don't know, May of this past year in 2023, I never really wanted to insert myself into the podcast. Like, I was the host and I brought on interesting people to interview, and it was always about them and what they had to offer and what they had to share. And it's still very much like that. But as we went through that rebrand and you and Kelly were questioning, how I wanted to move forward, the vibes, everything, like energetically, even the decision to rename the podcast like Everyday Endorphins with Stella on the cover art, that small decision to just put myself there, put my face on the cover, now has allowed me to give more of my perspective and my own opinion into the episodes. I had a lot of fear doing that before because I never wanted this to feel like it's all about me. I didn't want the spotlight to be on me, which is ironic because the show, like, I have a podcast, but I learned that putting my name there and putting my face on the cover doesn't mean that the attention's reflected back to me. It actually strengthens the ethos of the show and allows me to grow in my voice. And to your point earlier, when entrepreneurs are trying to grow their brand, but then there's this period of stagnation, that maybe there's like an internal block in that entrepreneur. That's something that I really experienced kind of when we actually were brought together before we decided to launch into the rebrand. Culmination of interviews that I just was ready to kind of release, and I didn't have things pre-recorded to keep going. And so it was just coming to this natural end. And I reflected back and I thought to myself, my audience isn't growing the way I want it to. I keep putting so much energy out. I need to just take a break because it's starting to really hurt my own self-confidence. And then I did a few more layers of digging and I realized that my relationship to ambition and success was deeply flawed and deeply wounded. And so no wonder the show was growing the way I wanted to. Like, it wasn't really coming from a place of authenticity and joy and passion. It was coming from, I want to achieve this outcome. I want to achieve this goal. And then I had to ask myself, well, why do I want that? Why is that the type of recognition that I want? And why do I feel like if I don't get that within the next year before I hit 25, I'm never going to get there? So I had to really ask myself these questions. And I could only ask myself those questions and listen to myself and understand the answers when I decided to not pick up the microphone and do something completely different and focus on other things, like having a nice social life and relaxing and enjoying the summer. And that was really uncomfortable for me because I think my entire life I was very much wired to be doing a million things at once, overextending myself, and just constantly be in the go, go, go mode, especially growing up in New York City. That's the environment I was raised in. So it was just hard for me to take a step back and give myself the permission to be okay with doing less. But in that period of time, I then realized, and now I'm working on it. I'm really falling in love again with what I'm creating. And I think that's what's going to propel things forward. At least I hope so.
I mean, first of all, that was the most generous and honest way that you could have possibly answered that. I'm over here, I hope everybody was tuning in with their full, rewind. Okay, guys? Because thank you for that. The ability to not only recognize, I have this disconnection or, this misunderstanding of how I view success. I need to rework this. I'm going to take that pause, which is so scary. It feels like you're quitting, even though it's just a brief moment in time, right? Mm-hmm. And you feel but this is part of what I'm doing. And it's you can come back. Someone said to me once when I was maybe 28, doing a million side hustles and having a full-time job with immense responsibility in the fashion industry. Someone said to me, real leaders think in years. They don't think in weeks. And I think it completely changed my mindset. And I'm kind of seeing that in you where you had that hard shift away from like, I need to be doing everything on a day by day or a week by week basis. Like my days and my weeks have to be full. And there is a difference when you start to see things as like growth through the year. What does the year look like? What's the goal for the year? Because taking a day, taking a week, taking even a month is like so chill when you're thinking so much bigger. And I want to come back to that relationship with success. I'd love to like dive in more there. Like what kind of realizations were you making about how you viewed success, about how you viewed work? You know, you kind of dove into it, but I'd love to hear more about that.
I think I always defined my worth based off of my output. Now I'm realizing that that's just not true. Like you can be a smart person who is ambitious and you don't have to overextend yourself all the time. Like that's not proof that you are smart, working super hard all the time. And I think these were just things that I noticed the way that maybe my parents approached work, the things that I did as a kid. For example, I had the opportunity to perform in the Metropolitan Opera Children's Chorus for like 8 years of my childhood.
Oh, wow. 8 years is a long time.
It was a long time. I joined the chorus when I was 6 years old and I left right when I finished freshman year of high school, so I was 14. Yeah. I loved the Met. I loved performing. So probably to no surprise, when I was younger, I wanted to be an actress. My parents said no. They were like, that industry is going to corrupt you. I'm very glad they said no.
My parents did the same thing. I was like, I want to be famous.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, not in a million years will
Yeah.
I allow that.
I mean, I wanted to be famous.
Thank you.
Literally.
Yeah.
And they shielded me from that. I wanted to be famous as a kid. Then I got the opportunity to be at the Met, which was incredible. But it was also something that not every kid in New York City, but like around the United States, like had the opportunity to do. And so I think I was always, I did that and I played the violin and I danced. And then all of that kind of naturally ended. And in high school, I was on a competitive rowing team and at a very competitive high school and everyone was going to the top colleges. And so I was just in this environment where someone will think highly of you because you've achieved XYZ, not because of maybe just who you are and what you bring to the table. All of this goes to say, I'm very close with my parents, and I think that they always wanted to give me as many opportunities as possible. So their desire to get me involved in all these activities, I think was a really positive thing. And I do believe it actually helped now shape the life that I'm leading. And I love that. I'm really grateful for that. But with every choice comes some sort of consequence, even if it comes from a place of love and wanting to give and provide for your child. So I'm starting to realize now maybe some of the ways that it's subconsciously impacted me around my belief system with success and ambition. But you're your own biggest barrier. No one was explicitly putting those thoughts into my head. It just kind of manifested that way. So now I'm kind of doing the work to rewire that and realize these two things can exist at once. And you, like you mentioned, you don't have to think so short term. There's actually power in patience and thinking longer term. What's your future self going to say about your present state? What do you want your future self to be like? And trusting that you'll get there.
You said something so powerful just now where you said, like, I think a lot of the ways that the activities I was put into, like, I think that obviously, like, your parents were making a great decision, but with every pro comes a con. And, you shifted it to say, we're also our biggest barrier. And I think that to me is just such a sign of resilience to be able to say, I know where this started and I'm still the only one responsible for overcoming it. I think that was a really big lesson for me to learn, especially in my entrepreneurship journey, was, well, I am this way because of this, or I am this way because of this. I am this way because of this. And maybe you didn't do this with the podcast, but through life, if you start to put like almost like pressure on things that you're doing, like I have to keep doing this because of this reason. The second people start really taking off is when they start to shift into this space of like, but I have control. I have control. What is my story about this? What is my interpretation of this? What do I care about? What is my ethos? So this is so powerful, such a sign of resilience. I mean, truly such wise findings there for yourself. And I'm happy to hear that. And then with that, you have this podcast, Everyday Endorphins, which, it's very mental health focused. And I'm wondering, like, for me, for instance, I have this push with the Unfiltered Entrepreneur or with the Doers or with Team AP Consulting, where I'm like, I know so much and it worked. I want you to know what I know. Do you feel that? Or are you saying, I want to learn, come along with me? Is it like we're going together, or I learned something I want to tell you? You know, like I'm curious what of that is the ethos.
That's a great question. I think it's really like I'm on this journey. This is what I'm doing. I hope it sticks and resonates with you. And this is something that's helped me and I want to share it. Truthfully, the interviews, I have the creative direction and agency for who I want to bring onto the show. So if I think that person's interesting and there's some value to be added, I want them on the podcast. And it's an opportunity for me to get an hour of someone's time and ask the questions I want to learn and hear from, right? So selfishly, I'm learning, but then it allows me to inform my own perspective and actually use myself as a case study and try to implement some strategies into my own life. And if something sticks, I can share it and say, hey, I've been doing this and like, this has been awesome. Maybe try this out for yourself. I'm very wary of a lot of the wellness people online that are very preachy and like, this is the right way to do things. This is what I'm doing. You know, my word is the gospel. Like that's the last thing I ever want to promote is like that I'm like some sort of guru, because I'm not. Like I'm 24.
Yeah, you're like a curator, you know?
Exactly. I'm a curator. I shared this metaphor recently with a friend and it resonated well. But I said to her that I feel like my brain is like a kaleidoscope and every single day, like something new emerges and some new perspective sheds light into my head or some new thought pops in or new realization. And it's like kind of overwhelming. Just having all of these thoughts and revelations and just kind of seeing things more clearly. So the growth that I've experienced is like really accelerating exponentially, especially in this period of time in my life. And so I'm not even in the position to like be preachy, and I don't want to be. It's very much like I feel motivated to grow when I see others gravitate towards that experience and that journey and want to also grow alongside me. So it's very much like this collaborative environment.
I have a similar analogy. Mine's different than yours, but I'm curious what you think of it or if it like hits you too. What I tell people is like, are you spiritual or religious, or do you have any higher energy?
Very spiritual. Yeah. And you know, I don't know about the religious part because I was raised Greek Orthodox and I never really paid attention I never read the Bible or paid attention in Sunday school. But I think part of the Greek culture is so deeply tied to the religion and the spirituality that comes from the Orthodox faith. And I've recently really reconnected with like that identity. So maybe I am religious. I don't know, but definitely very spiritual.
Yeah. Okay. I am too very spiritual. And so for me, I always joke, and maybe I'm aging myself, so please ignore me if this like doesn't resonate, but I relate myself to the Goosebumps books. Did you ever have the Goosebumps books, or like those books where it would be like flip to this page, flip to this page, flip to this page? Have you had those?
I loved those books.
Right. So what I like to think is that God or the universe or like some spiritual being that we don't know about has that whole book. And it's not one book, it's like millions of pages. And we have the autonomy when we see that page to say, if you want to go down the path, flip to page 30. If you want to climb the building, you know, go to page 150. We have the autonomy to say, oh, well, I want to do this. But it unlocks a completely new path ahead of us where, okay, so now I flip to page 30 and now I'm not even by the building. And now I have to decide if I'm going to go here, if I'm going to do this. Okay, well, I'm going to choose this. And now a new thing has unlocked. And so we're always walking new paths if we keep reading the story and if we keep choosing new. However, if we stay on that page and we don't choose anything new, we're going to be living the same story over and over and over again. That to me is a bit of like relinquishing control over the future, but also feeling very control of where I'm going. And I bring that up because it kind of reminds me of like that kaleidoscope thing where it feels a bit like there's so much out there. There's so much to learn. There's so much to do. There's so much that, you know, we learn about ourselves consistently. And I think a big part of growing up, at least for me, has been realizing you never really arrive anywhere. You just consistently are relearning and relearning and relearning. And I think what you're doing with the podcast is very similar to that, where you're saying like, I'm not saying I'm Stella and I know all come listen because I have the keys to the castle. You're also not saying, I don't know anything, come with me while I learn. You're saying, this is my life and I'm inviting you to join and we'll learn together. And I have some tips. And if it doesn't hit, it doesn't hit. And if it does, then it does. And I think that's a strong way to do it because the people in your space will feel like they're in this with you. It's a strong strategy, but it's also a really great way to connect, which is, I think, what we all are like wanting anyway. And that's what you're trying to build.
Absolutely. I love that analogy that you used. It reminds me of this idea that we are constantly reinventing ourselves and that you should give yourself the permission to be able to do that, not feeling stuck in a certain way. I think it's very empowering too, because when we feel such strong emotions or we allow our reactions to be governed by that emotional feeling we experience, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that like at any point your life can change. And like, it's really empowering to know that you can make that choice. Like, yeah, it's letting go of control because when you do that, you're learning to not have your identity and sense of self so tied to something external that can change in an instant. So it's really the question of like, well, how do you identify yourself, not in relation to like anything else around you? How do you create that strong, centered sense of self? And I think it's through having the bravery and courage to constantly reinvent.
I dated somebody for like 6 or 7 years. When I was 22 to 29, I dated somebody and he had this goal, this like personal mission of self-development where he said, I think that I will feel the most myself when I will be who I am in every room I enter. And I thought that was really fascinating because when you start to see some people acting one way at work or one way with friends or talking differently around different people, there's this question of identity where can you exist as you in this room, in this room, in this room, in this room? That's kind of a little bit about what we're talking about, like that identity of like no external consequences. And it's actually kind of like a perfect segue into something I do want to talk about as well, which is, okay, so it's kind of funny. I tell people I don't do things I'm not good at. So I'm good at everything I do. I don't do things that I'm not good at. I don't like to fail. I don't like to do things that I don't think I can figure out. No, it's one thing to be like, I'll be new at that, but I know I can get it. I don't like to do things that I know I'm just like, never gonna be good at. Like, you're not gonna see me ice skating, okay? So I say that though, because I have such great experience with a lot of great things. I can easily pitch myself to Nordstrom, easily pitch myself or pitch product to this person or to this editorial writer or whatever it is, because I've done that stuff in my sleep. I could do that stuff in my sleep. However, me time is so new to me. And it scares the shit out of me because I have never built a product with my face attached to it, with my name attached to it. And so I'm looking for all of these different ways that I can like get myself out of it. And I realized a few months ago, I have to be in it. It has to be me. It has to be my story. And I look at people like you, and you very much inspired me when we were working together because here is this young, feisty, ambitious woman who has got her shit together enough as one can and is very clear about what she's doing. And you were like, oh yeah, I'm like pitching Juice Press and I'm pitching this person, I'm pitching this person. And I was like, I'm so scared to do those things. Like that scares. I'm like sweating thinking about it. Like the people that you've worked with, the people that you've pitched. I mean, I want you to share a little bit about those people that you have kind of like had those collaborations with, because I think it's super impressive. And I want to inspire the audience around being able to take those bold moves, because it was after that where I was like, I didn't realize I'm not doing those things because I'm like, they don't care about me. I'm a nobody. Like, who cares about me? Who cares about what I'm doing? And you really inspired me. And I don't think I ever shared that with you, to kind of like put myself out there and start doing things where I'm like, I might be small, but you're going to care about me. Okay.
Thank you. That like just made my day, honestly. So thank you for sharing that. It's something I've really had to work on too, that belief system. Well, why would I pitch myself? Like, why would they believe what I have to say? But if you don't believe it yourself, how can you get someone else to buy into the idea? So it's like coming to the table with that sense of confidence and the utmost belief that something is there, even if you don't physically have it in your hands. Like, you care so much about it that it's going to go somewhere, and trusting that, really trusting in the things that aren't present right now, but they're kind of brewing under the scenes. But also, I want to share a story because this is one moment that I consistently come back to every time I have doubts or apprehensions, or I feel misguided as to what where the future of the podcast
I'm so ready for it. I'm like, yeah, give it to me. Let's go.
A lot of people ask me if I share my podcast to someone for the first time, oh, what's an episode I should start with? And that question honestly stresses me out because I've done so many interviews. Sometimes I forget like what I've done, honestly. Like I don't go back and listen to my own episodes. Like I do it, I record it, I put it out there, but I don't like listen to myself over and over again. So I kind of forget.
Your Spotify Wrapped isn't just like Everyday Endorphins, #1. You listen to 35,000 minutes.
Imagine. Oh my God. Yeah. So I get like stressed about answering that question. But there is one episode I do share with people to listen to because I think the story as to how that whole episode came together is what the guiding force should be with like moving through every single decision I make with the podcast. So I had the opportunity almost 2 years ago now to interview the CEO of the Equinox Hotel in Hudson Yards and his wife. And they came onto the podcast and they were guests. How did this happen? I did not go to Equinox and try to like LinkedIn message people. And I didn't try to play the game. I didn't try to like network my way to this one influential person, right? Basically, there was this mental health nonprofit called Project Healthy Minds that I'd followed on Instagram. I thought they had a really cool aesthetic and great messaging. One day I see that they post about this art gallery in Chelsea and this exhibit that they were partnering with. A portion of the proceeds for this artwork was going to go towards supporting Project Healthy Minds. So I look at it and I'm like, this seems really cool. Let me go check it out. So I bring a friend, we go to the art gallery and we're walking around and I see this woman sitting there kind of managing the exhibit. So I go up to her and I start talking to her. And without even really knowing anything, I was like, can you tell me about the artist? Tell me about the art. She turned out to be the artist's mother. And the artist had struggled with a lot of mental health issues in his lifetime and ended up taking his own life. And when he was in a mental institution, he created these drawings called the Pippins, a series of drawings. Each Pippin had a thumbs up in front of them and then a middle finger up behind them to show how we don't always express on the outside how we feel internally. And so there was a bunch of these drawings at the exhibit, a bunch of different Pippins. Each Pippin also had a poem attached to it as well. So there was this element of writing that was infused in the art. Just really beautiful, really incredible story. And so I'm talking to the mother, learning more about the artwork. One thing leads to another. And I say, I would love to interview you and your husband on my podcast. The art is beautiful and the story is really moving. And I would love to also hear your perspective on how you moved through grief and how you're still staying committed to spreading the message of mental health awareness through what you're doing. And she said, yeah. And I said, here's, what's your email? I'll send you an email. I start doing some more research. And then I realized that her husband was the CEO of the Equinox Hotel. And of course that was cool and shiny and okay, yeah, that would look great for the show, but it was never about that. It was really about what I cared about and seeing the value in that story and being so moved. I got to meet with them. I got to do the recording. I'm so grateful to Brigitte and Chris for seeing the value in what I was doing and wanting to support me in that way. And we did my first podcast event. It was a gallery viewing at the Chelsea Gallery. And I brought like 50 of my friends to come and experience being around the Pippins. And that was the first of the many different podcast events I got to do that year and into the next. And, I shared this story again because when you do things from a place of love and from a place of really wanting to fill your own cup, you will be guided down the right path. There's no way you won't be. And the shift that I had experienced was that I was so focused on the shiny things that it made the work unbearable and so not full of joy that I needed to take a break. So now I always come back to that story because I do believe that when you follow the things that you deeply care about, you will never be misguided.
It's a perfect example of that. So I have this space called the Round Table, and people can work with me for a year. It's for service-based businesses, blah, blah, blah. One of the things that I say when I get in there is the lifestyle is the goal and profit is the vehicle. So I'm not making you a profitable business because that's the goal. I'm making you a profitable business so you can go spend time with your kids or travel or invest or create a charity, whatever it is, right? And I truly believe that when you align with and you get closer to aligning with what feels so authentic to you, doors just open without getting like super woo-woo and manifesty. But it just goes to show you saying like, I want to go to that event. I'm going to have this organic conversation. You're not going in with a reason or
like an agenda.
An agenda. Thank you. You know, you're not going in with anything like that. You're going in to have an authentic experience, and you had an authentic experience. It just so happened that it was a quite credible one, like that's not so bad. I think those things happen, and now you've been like pitching with and working with all these incredible brands. And I'd love to hear a little bit about like that experience too, because I think that some people in my space will say to me like, but I couldn't. And I always say to them, why not? Try it. What's the worst that they say? No. And then it comes to me to do it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. I'm scared, which I'm getting past. But I'd love to like hear from you what that has been like and the doors that have opened, because I think it's helpful for people to hear. I don't run like a $5 million business, and I'm having some pretty cool opportunities and some pretty cool conversations.
Yeah, it definitely is scary. I used to think that I needed to do everything all at once. I needed to partner with every single brand that I found interesting. But now it's really more about not really chasing an opportunity. Being persistent for sure is important, but I used to approach things from the mindset of like, I need to follow up every week. I need to be at the top of their inbox. And it was just kind of pushy. Like if you think about the way that relationships are built, it's kind of like the rubber band effect. When you're putting all your energy towards someone and they're not meeting you, it's just going to drive them away. But if you allow yourself to like step back, know your worth, people kind of naturally gravitate back to you if they're the right fit. And so now I see partnerships that way. I'll put my cards on the table. I would love to work with you. This is why I think there's synergy. And if things are going to happen, they will happen. And now I'm learning to trust that rather than chase it. And so I think if you can come to the table with that inner confidence, like, yeah, this is why I think this would be a cool opportunity. Let me know if you're in. And if you're in, we can work together. But if not, that's fine. There's going to be another cool brand that's going to want to work with me. And not like seeing one is more important than the other, I think is so important. For example, for Aloe Yoga to work with me, definitely like Aloe's the bigger face here for sure. But I think it goes to show, from the contact that I worked with from the Aloe side, they were able to see something in me that was of equal value to Aloe. And I don't make money like that company does. I think with my own brands, I don't,
oh man,
we're just at different levels, but I think it's like treating passions with respect is super important too. And that's really magical.
I want everybody to kind of take away from this. What you're kind of saying, tell me if I'm wrong, is it's not about like, I need this person to say yes. It's connect with all these people and put your cards on the table, to use your words. And the person who sees it is correct. The person who says, that is valuable. We see the importance of this. That like validates our own mission. It's not necessarily saying, but they said no. It's like, no, that wasn't for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's true with everything in life, not even just in an entrepreneurial setting, but like everything. The people that we attract into our lives, the people that we want to stick around and help us grow. It's the things that aren't necessarily forced.
And what has this been like growing this while you have a full-time job?
It's definitely been difficult, but I feel like I'm in this position in my job where I'm creating like a really unique path at Accenture. And I'm really excited to explore what that's going to look like. I just aligned into Accenture's innovation business unit. And I think that's way more congruent. And like, there's so many more synergies with being in innovation consulting with doing this entrepreneurial side thing rather than the work I was doing before. And it drives a lot of the business at Accenture, but I was doing a lot of consulting work for our life sciences clients, just more traditional project-based work for pharmaceuticals. I learned a lot there, kind of just like baseline foundational skill sets that I needed. But now moving more into this creative space where I can strengthen the skills that I'm already good at and have a natural strength with, it's giving me energy to also want to do the podcast on the side too. Like I just see everything come together, and I want to continue to do that as I hopefully progress at Accenture or wherever my career and life takes me. I don't want to see them as separate necessarily. So it definitely is hard. There's definitely sometimes sacrifices need to be made, or I need to put things on pause with the podcast because I'm just too heads down with the project work that I'm doing at the time, but that's okay. I've gotten to be very vocal about my podcast with Accenture. And at first I was very
Oh, that's so hard.
I was very fearful. I was like, oh my God, are they going to think that I am not working? But I proved that I could do both. They really celebrate that and love it. And it makes me actually want to be more present in my day job because I feel psychologically safe to express every part of me. I think in that regard, in a way, it's also been easy in some ways to be able to bring two together.
I felt the exact same way. I always had side hustles. I had this goal that my side hustle was going to make the same amount as my full-time job so that I would love my full-time job more, because the thing about working in the fashion industry is that you get paid garbage. And so for me, I was like, I'm not leaving the fashion industry for a better paying job. I love the fashion industry. So I want to make good money from my side hustle so that my fashion industry work feels so much more fun because it doesn't necessarily have to pay the bills. And that was kind of how I broke the model in my brain. But I kept it a secret and I didn't tell anybody. And I was tiptoeing around things. And I was like, oh, I have to take a sick day. I'm so sick. And I'm running to this meeting. But and it wasn't until later when it took me probably 6 years to ever even tell a coworker that it was happening. Right. And I finally started to express it and tiptoe around it and mention it here and there and drip it. And once I finally was open about, oh yeah, well, I do that. Not only did I feel way more confident, I think I was taken a little bit more seriously. Maybe that was a projection of my own confidence coming through, but I noticed that people were maybe thinking, oh, wow, you can really spin a ton of plates. You can hold a lot on your shoulders. And being in a sales role, I made it my mission. I will not drop in sales 1 inch after I tell them that I'm doing this. Otherwise, they are going to be saying to me, it's because you have that thing. It made me better at my work. It made me, to your point, feel seen. It made me feel safe. I don't have to hide this anymore. My coworkers didn't always like it, but that's a them problem. I don't really care about that, But I just think it's really interesting. And that kind of brings me to what is next for you? Is it maintenance? Is it doing what we've been doing and keeping it going? Do we have bigger ambitions for 2024? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, well, I think I've hit this inflection point in my career now at Accenture, having the opportunity to get promoted to the role of being a consultant, not being in this analyst development program, getting to have more ownership in the work that I'm doing. I'm excited to actually build that kind of career too. I don't really want to leave that to just put all my eggs in this one basket with Everyday Endorphins. I'm excited to see what that's like. I'm excited to now be a part of the innovation space at Accenture, which I know has been also going through some changes internally. So I'm excited to see how I can build my own path. I call it my own Accenture adventure, see where that will take me. And as far as the podcast, I actually kind of want to not focus on metrics. I really don't want to give my attention towards that. I don't even want to look at it because I just want to keep doing things from a place of joy and love and excitement and learn. I want to read more. I think reading is going to help me bring a better perspective to what I talk about on the show. And I want to keep finding cool people to bring on and be really intentional about the types of events that I'm doing and not feel like I have to do an event every month, but be a bit more patient with it. So I'm just excited for all the people that I'm going to meet, how I will hopefully conduct myself in this new era. I think it's really, it's growth. And I feel kind of like a little phoenix and the ashes are shedding, the feathers are falling and now something new is emerging. So I'm really looking forward to 2024. I think it's going to be a good year. But then again, we looked forward to 2020 and then COVID hit. So you never know.
You never know. And, I think you have a good point that I think that sometimes we see goals or KPIs and we see a number with a comma or a spike on a graph or whatever it is. And the emotional KPIs are just as validating. I think really being able to say, I left the year really mastering that patience of things happening in their own time or moving slower in with intention, such big wins, even with something like that. I kind of put words in your mouth, but things like that are still such great things to move towards and to move through. So I'm excited to watch it all. And I hope that we all follow along and celebrate you. So, which leads me to where can we do that? Where can we follow? Where can we fall in love with you? Where can we become avid fans where everybody stops listening to me and they start listening to you because they love you so much? Where can we do that?
Well, thank you so much. This has been like the fastest hour of my life. So you're an amazing host, and I'm really honored that you brought me onto your show. So thank you. You can listen to Everyday Endorphins on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. Just type in Everyday Endorphins. If you want to follow on social media and stay up to date with episodes that I'm releasing, events that I'm doing, it's just at Everyday Endorphins on Instagram. And I recently launched a Substack newsletter where I kind of recap the episodes that I do on a monthly basis, some of my own thoughts or revelations or things I've been thinking about. So I share a little bit of that every month in a newsletter, and the Substack is just called Everyday Endorphins. So you can subscribe there and follow along some editorial content. And then if you want to connect with me separate from the podcast, it's just Stella Stephanopoulos on Instagram at Stella Stephanopoulos. That's where you can find me.
Stella, thank you for the time. Thank you so much for your generosity, for your vulnerability, for your unfiltered nature on the Unfiltered Entrepreneur. We hope to have you back sometime. We hope to do something together sometime. It was a pleasure working with you. It was even more of a pleasure to have you on this episode today. So thank you so much, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you.
Before we go, I'm inviting you on my mission to help female entrepreneurs, okay? I am a girl's girl, and I want to see every single one of you empowered, living your biggest and boldest life. And the easiest way for people to access free information and a community of like-minded women is by sharing this podcast. Leave a review on Apple, rate us on Spotify. But more than anything, if you liked this episode, please take a screenshot, share it to Instagram, and tag us so we know that you are loving the content, but also other people can see that you are an entrepreneur who is focused on her game. Now remember, the motto of the Team AP space is, it's not hard, it's new. And if nobody has told you this, I want you to remember, you've got this. Entrepreneurship is hard. I love you. I believe in you. And I am so grateful to be in service of you, whether free or paid. And until next time, stay focused, babes.